load and send those bills out. If we had to have staff to send out 10,000 bills every month with a stamp, with an envelope, open those, do delinquent account issues, the cost would be enormous. And I think we always have to keep in mind, you know, as you've said, we're all in this together to a certain extent, and we always need to do things in a cost-effective basis. And just cutting the pie more efficiently, but more expensively, isn't necessarily the right policy decision.
The only thing that concerns me is you look at some of the criteria that you're looking at here, but there's other criteria too that will have to be looked at also. I mean, you know, down the avenue, they're close to the treatment plant, but they got a pump station down there and they pump everything. We just kind of went through that pump station and the force main. They couldn't afford it, but everybody in this district paid for it.
And likewise, the Dorfman project in the city, everybody paid for, and
so how can you give them, because they're closer to the treatment plant, a lower rate?
well, I think
Than the
that's,
guy up here.
I think that's why we say that there's a certain element of the fee that's a base cost because we're all in this together. And you can't separate out areas and say you're purely closer and you're purely more farther away and you're purely smaller and you're purely bigger. There's some component of this that is we all exist together and we're all better off together, being able to fund the system and being able to shoulder costs as time goes on in different areas. You know, we've talked about the Dorfman project in the city. We're doing mainline lining right now. The Avenue project, the Baldwin siphon. We're going to do Kunkel Creek, and the Oakview area couldn't afford, you know, 1,200 feet of drilling all by themselves. And so we have to balance keeping the district together, keeping the funding cooperative, but at least saying, is there some difference between a 240 square foot RV and a 10,000 square foot house? I don't know what that number is and whether or not there should even be a difference, but we at least ought to acknowledge that we've got a very diverse system and at least be transparent that we look at those things and at least talk about them.
I think it's you know, something that has happened on many occasions over the last 10 years, Jack, where we've had this particular room loaded with people from, you know, the trailer parks, etc. It's I mean, where's the proportionality there? And so we have to be, you know, considerate. We have to be, you know, proactive in looking at this from all angles, utilizing all the factor information we're talking about, the complexities, and make sure we do our due diligence as a board and follow through with that in the study.
No, I agree with what you're saying, but I'll tell you something. In 1969, when I first got on the Miners Oak Sanitary District, we had the people from the mobile home parks in. The same way, they wanted a lesser rate. The rate at that time was $8.54 or something like that a month for the sewer, but they wanted, you know, they've wanted all along. And again, it takes everybody to paying into the same thing to get the money to operate the system. And I think when Prop 13 came along, what Prop 13 did, Miners Oak Sanitary, you know how we got our rate? We made up a budget, sent it to the county of Ventura, and they decided what our rate would be.
I hear you, Jack, but in 1969 we did not have Prop 218.
No, I know, that's why Prop 13 came in.
So that's why we have to look at things seriously.
The district could put a request for this is what we need, and the county gave it to you. And that's why the taxes kept going up and up and up.
I think the goal here is ultimately to demonstrate to the state legislature that we are managing this issue in some fair manner. And fair is open to interpretation, but we're not going to get past the state by doing nothing. And so we have to at least have looked at it seriously and looked at it in some detail and come up with whatever conclusion we do and justify it in writing. And then If the state doesn't like it at that point, then, you know, you live with a dictator sometimes. But I think we need at least to do that, and I applaud the committee that's going through it. I'm wondering when you think that you might have more definitive conclusions for the board as a whole to look at.
I think in probably 30 days or so, 4 to 6 weeks out, we'll have a couple of scenarios to start having policy debates. If we go past June of this year and we don't make a change, well, by July 1, we need to send in our rates to the county to be on the tax roll. So if it's just not the right thing and it just doesn't work, then we'll deal with that, you know, as time goes on. If something does make sense and it does meet the needs of fairness and appropriateness and still make the district function as a whole and all together, then we kind of need to have it done by about May to get it in line for the next year. But again, as this board has done on many issues, we haven't rushed things. We haven't made decisions just because a deadline. We've always put in the time and the effort to make sure it's done right and it's done thoroughly. So if it works out and we get it done, then that's fine. If not, and it needs more work just because it isn't flushed out, then that's fine too.
Mr. Bagley.
So, when's your idea for the next ordinance committee?
I don't have a date yet. We're digging through the county assessor's records to see if we can figure out how to pull some additional information out of there. It's a large database that has some trouble. Even Yan's struggling a little bit.
John is struggling.
Yep.
Mr. Quan.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a correction. Director Quillisi mentioned that the state has to, you said something about the state having to review the rates?
No, I said if the state legislature decides to do something, they could dictate that to us.
Okay, yeah, that's, just wanted to make sure that there is really no state review of your rate structure. That's really up to you, and if people have an issue with it, they take it up with a different agency. The state probably, because of the citizen enacted initiatives of Prop 13, 218, and 26, probably is not in a position to touch that third rail. They never have, they never will, and I would be very surprised if they did get involved in this situation.
Anything further from the board? Mr. Orrick.
Where did the quote come from on page 144?
There was some legal discussion, and I'll dig up the reference for you. It was in response to some related to Prop 26, and I'll dig that up, that excerpt, and give that to you.
This is from,
It was from a legal journal.
What particular quote is being referred to?
This is the
The question.
the question of proportionality.
Okay.
So
middle of the page.
that could have been, if it's a legal journal, it could be an academic opinion.
Sure, but I think I pulled it out because it sort of highlights the problem between everybody paying the same and perfectly precise. And in general, what the courts have said is, if you can come up with something that is reasonably proportional, it doesn't have to be perfectly precise, because that's not the way the law sort of looks at sort of fees and stories. It's an appropriate proportional, not an exact proportion.
Wasn't proportionality also, based upon that class of ratepayers versus the individual? I think that's what we're referring to under 218,
Right.
That's a potential, I just want to add what Jeff said, and he's correct, even though this is from a legal journal, it's based upon state law. There is case law that speaks almost exactly the same thing, that there's not a requirement for exact precision with regards to this proportionality question. The key case in the Supreme Court is Nolan versus, I think it's the County of Ventura. Yeah, and it talks about rough proportionality. And those are all cases in the same vein, and that's the word that they use, rough proportionality. And as long as you show a nexus and rough proportionality, that will pass that type of legal review in the courts. So, yeah, even though it may be from a legal journal, this is basically a clear reading of state case law.
And Nolan had to do with beach access, right?
Exactly. Right. But it's the same concept.
35 years.
But the overall philosophy is, if you don't come off of flat rate, then you have to justify that.
I think Jeff made the case that if you stay with flat rate, you're open to a potential Prop 218, Prop 26 issue. And this is preclusion that we're trying to develop that. The law is moving to try to do the proportionality. They think that's fair. And that's a good concept, and that's in the state constitution. So that's where every agency is looking at that and saying, hey, where are we now and where do we need to be?
Gentlemen, anything further?
Item 17.
Thank you, Jeff. We'll anxiously be awaiting your invite for our next meeting.
Okay.
Hash this out, and just take a minute to thank the staff and the work they do in record keeping and hard work on the hog stuff in the restaurants
It's,
and businesses.
you know, in some ways, I feel bad for businesses. There are a lot of hardworking people just trying to run a business and do what they do. And we work really hard to try and be interpreters and translators of what state law and stuff is. But man, it is getting tough to run a business, run a shop, run a restaurant. And I mean, it's just getting tough. It's just really tough. What you have to do in the record keeping and if you've got any kind of priority pollutant other than grease, man, it just gets tough. If you use any kind of chemicals or acids or you know, alcohol over a certain concentration is an explosive. And so, you know, if you're making a certain kind of whiskey or you're a distiller, and now it's a RCRA federal issue. So I feel sorry for businesses, I really do.
Thank you.
I just wanted to also, thank Brenda for her cryptologist work that she did in trying to decipher the city's old records.
Oh, it's been an ongoing project.
Okay, I think with this, we'll move on to item 18, and we'll save item 17 for the end, so we can get through all the public information first, and then break away for the closed session. Information items, item 18. Or monthly investment report. Anybody want anything pulled out of there?
My packet goes from 16 to 18, there's no 17.
17 will be our closed session.
17 is the closed session. So nothing for monthly investment. Staff reports. Anybody have any questions of the staff? Just thank everybody for a continued safe
I have one
workplace.
for Brenda. Brenda, what was the award that Lori got?
It was from CWEA for administrative assistant award, isn't that what they call
Oh,
it?
the-
Administrative, for CWEA of the Tri-County section.
Ah. Did we in any way acknowledge that?
Yes, we did.
Oh, okay. Very good.
Mr. Baggett.
I like the big zero for the treatment plant performance record. No violations, thank you.
Great job. Committee reports. I guess everything we've gone over on that. Direct for reports on meetings and seminars, I did attend the special districts dinner. And I missed and forgot my report this evening, so I will give that to Brenda and have it for the next packet. Mr. Curtis?
I'd like to make one thing from LAFCO. It looks like especially the cost for LAFCO is gonna go up because, the county of Ventura has asked them to vacate their, facilities at LAFCO. So
Vacated?
we're gonna have, well, it seems as though the board of supervisors need more room. That's exactly where it's coming from.
Well, since it's so close to county council, it's probably them needs some more.
Yeah, one or the other, one or the other. But anyway, I just wanna let you know that we'll probably
Their
be
rent's going up, so our
paying more
cost
money,
is going up.
since all special districts fund LAFCO and that, so, just to keep you appraised.
Thanks, Mr. Curtis. Mr. Kaiser?
Yeah, along with Mr. Curtis and Chair Stone, I did also attend the special districts meeting in Oxnard. It's good to know that the special districts is still operating in the black, which is good to hear at your treasurer's report. And also, we did have a guest speaker there, the new sheriff, Bill Yu, fine gentleman. He had a lot of good things to say in the way of, cooperative types of efforts with agencies, special districts especially. And, they've had a tough year with the sheriff's department, with all the things that have happened, the borderline, bar, as well as, one of their search and rescue people getting killed. And he went through a lot of the background as to what happened during that event at the borderline, which I think was, it was very moving in a lot of ways. It was heartfelt too, and I think that our support is there individually as well as collectively with the special districts towards a safer year for the sheriff's department. We hope that that everybody is looking out for each other, and that includes the public looking out for those people in law enforcement. Overall, it was a great meeting. I think that we learned a lot more about the sheriff, the new sheriff in town, and what he's going to be doing, and we'll probably be seeing more of his staff as the year progresses in different types of events. So that's my report, and I'm sticking to it.
Sounds good to me. Thanks, Mr. Kaiser.
Mr. Stone?
Mr. Curtis?
I just want to reiterate what Pete said. He was probably, I've heard a lot of the sheriffs come to our meetings, and he's probably was the best one to give us knowledge. And boy, I'll tell you, if you want a program, if you're in a club or something like that, you like a program, he'd be a great speaker because he's enjoyable and you're willing to listen to him is what the whole thing. Good speaker. He's not afraid for the hard questions either.
Very personal.
Yeah, very personal.
Thank you. Moving on to items of interest, correspondence, or articles. Anybody have anything of interest? Nothing. Board member and general manager comments.
Mr. Stone?
Mr. Ulrich?
I have a question, a couple of questions actually. Is the, Mr. Palmer, is that lateral that the city has over, that comes from Libby Park to, Signal Street still causing issues?
I'm not aware if they have lined and fixed the lateral in the park. There were two issues in the park. There's actually three issues in the vicinity of the city and the park. The first was the lateral from across the park, which basically comes from the Mexican restaurant there, down diagonally across the park, connects up to the park restrooms, and then comes across the park and out to Signal Street. They have to do a PSL on that piece of pipe, and I think they were in process of working through that with Travis. The line, the segment of that lateral that goes underneath the Little Rock Creek, to my knowledge, has not been, anything has been done on that.
And the issue is that it leaks and is deflected, or?
It is a sag. It is a definite belly, and it fills up with debris, and If enough pressure gets behind it, it flushes itself out. If not, it burps out of, it could burp out of a manhole right there behind the post office into the creek. To my knowledge, the city has not done anything with that.
And I'm trying to remember, what's the district's appropriate ordinance for a PSL that's not, that has those sort of violations?
Well, there's two issues with that. I'll check with Travis on the PSL function itself. That is part of our PSL ordinance. That is a set ordinance for what triggered the PSL was the revisions to the restaurants that when there was a modification, a change of business license on those restaurants, that is a trigger point for a PSL. The lateral happens to be city.
And you're talking about the building that's former B of A?
Yes.
Yeah.
That is the trigger. I'll check with Travis on that. The second piece of the sag underneath the river or the creek there is really an issue that relates to them not maintaining their lateral in a proper working order.
It's been that way for a long time.
Yes. The third issue with the city is there is a piece of old main line that comes out of the maintenance yard. I believe it's a 12-inch. So it's not even really a lateral size, it's a 12-inch diameter main line that was converted to a lateral coming out of the shop lower yard area and out onto Montgomery.
More Montgomery, yeah.
And so I understand that they are doing some work on that line as well, and there are some problems there. I'll check with Travis on what the specifics are, but I know he was in tune with both the PSL in the park and the 12-inch lateral out of the yard. The piece underneath the river, we've written the city and said you need to fix the lateral, and I'm not really sure what their.
That was a while ago though, too.
Yeah, right.
Right? Okay, so, and it's not appropriate to issue them a notice of violation like anyone else with a PSL issue?
It would be appropriate to do that.
And is there any reason why that hasn't been done?
The reason I didn't do that is they told me it was in their budget and they had a capital improvements project and they were gonna work on designing it and fixing it.
And that was when? Recently?
Not recently.
No. Yeah.
Pump outs are more.
So, I think it's reasonable to treat the city like everybody else.
So you can throw in the manhole and the line behind the lawns too.
You know,
Right.
the city gets, referred to oftentimes, whether it's, and I characterize, the city of Ojai, oftentimes in this, at this agency, bordering on trash talk, but the bottom line on it is, this is just elemental notions of fairness. And the city's always going to be in the position of saying, well, we're working on it. I mean, as a citizen, I've gotten that sort of response, and that may be the case, it may not be the case. But I'm just looking at elemental notions of fairness, that the district has a PSL ordinance, and that seems to be an ongoing violation, and they should receive a notice of violation to perhaps expedite all of those good intentions. So, unless anybody's got, can see a reason not to, I don't know. It just occurred to
Seems
me.
like a simple matter of equity.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is not a matter for a vote.
No, I'm not asking for a
I
vote.
think the general manager has enforcement
Point taken,
discretion.
thank you.
That's
Yeah,
all.
and
Point
if
taken.
he just wants to make that as an information line, that, no need for acclamation or consensus here.
General manager, any comments?
A couple of things. Staff met with the county and the city on the ADU regulations. I think they were enlightening. I don't think we resolved everything between the agencies completely, but it was very, very good conversations about how both the county and the city look at state law as it relates to ADU. We've started moving and processing some permits and some applications on the ADU side of things. I think that will pick up steam, but I think definitely some ground was broken. Our flow last couple of days has been down about 1.77 million gallons a day. So we're up about 200,000 gallons a day of extra flow due to still seeping groundwater I'll show you a little video of something here in a moment.
So it's a continuing I&I
Yes,
problem?
yes. It used to be a lot higher. I mean, the 200,000 gallons a day is a big number, but it's a lot lower than we used to get. For instance, the low flow on the Creek Road trunk line, which comes down Creek Road from the city, in normal non-drought or non-rain times was about 210 gallons a minute. I looked at it yesterday, last night, it was at 280, so we're up 70 gallons a minute on that flow. That's not a huge
30%,
number,
yeah.
but it's a big number. Interesting phone call I got from Fish and Wildlife today. They were looking for where our discharge into the Ventura River was. It's an interesting conversation about where they had heard we put water into the river and where we actually put water in the river.
Who called?
Yeah,
Staff person.
must have been new.
It was just an interesting off-the-wall conversation. I think we handled it. That's all I have. I have a couple of videos if we'll,
Jeff,
yeah.
in light of all the rains we've been having and such, are there any areas concerned right now where things are percolating upward through the soil or nasty? You know, there are certain tracks that in the past, we wanted to look at them.
I-
See what-
We have seen an uptick in septic tank users coming to us looking to convert from septic to sewer. It happens every year. We have a wet year. The groundwater comes up, the septic tank leach fields don't work, sewer backs up into the house, and people want to get on sewer. So we're seeing an uptick. I've heard that there are some recent tests that are showing E. coli in some local streams, but I haven't seen the actual test, and I'm not gonna sort of spout off, but it doesn't surprise me. Every time we get wet years, you can drive around and smell the septic tanks and smell the sewage in certain areas of town. It just happens. This is a typical video, short little video of a valley meadow where we have sideways. You can see roots at the this is the top of the pipe, and almost every joint on Valley Meadow has roots, and almost every joint is dripping like this. It's just the way it is when the ground gets wet. We just start. You have 100 of these or 500 of these. They're all just dripping. That's where the extra water comes from. This is a pipe bursting project that we're actually working on up on Feliz and Alto and Valley Meadow. In this area, the county's going to pave. Wanted us to get in the street and fix it before they paved. This is where you have a cable that's pulling the head through the existing 8-inch pipe, and you'll see how it's got an air compressor and a large expander nozzle. There's the expander nozzle coming through. It just breaks apart the clay pipe and pulls in behind it a black one-piece long high-density polyethylene black pipe. And so this is what we're doing. We're pulling in new pipe to get rid of all the joints. There's the black pipe. We're doing thousands of feet of this.
Good job.
This is where the sewer line is under the water line, and we're pulling in a new sewer line, but the water line was installed 5 inches above the clay pipe. And so here they don't have the hammer going because they don't want to risk cracking this asbestos cement water line. And you can see how they're using just the hydraulic force of the cable to pull and you can see it scrapes the dirt off the top of the nozzle, it's so close.
Whose water line is that?
That's Ventura River Water District.
Good. Why did
But that's,
And you're cutting it close there, Jack.
The water line was there before the sewer line.
No. Actually, the opposite.
Talk to the Oakview Sanitary District.
so this is what pipe bursting is, and then they dig a hole at each one of the laterals and reconnect the lateral after they explode or expand out the clay pipe.
Is the new pipe the same size as the old one?
The new pipe is the same size. In this case, we blew up the 8-inch with the 8-inch
This is
plastic.
6 to 8.
Is it 6 to 8?
A lot of it is 6 to 8.
We're gonna have to do this in Miners Oaks.
Utilize more flexible though, right?
Right, and there's no joints.
Yeah.
This is when we were coming into a pipe bursting and coming into a manhole, and you can see the amount of force and the amount of tension. This is the air compressor hammer that helps propel the nozzle through the existing clay pipe. So, I mean, things are busy out there in the streets, even while it's raining, we're still trying to make improvements.
Has that project been going well?
It's going well. The proximity water line, sewer line issues are slowing us down a little bit because we wanna make sure we don't, cause damage to the water line while we're doing our work, but.
Well, built-in sags to the sewer line.
Right.
Are they planning on changing the elevation over that when they put the new water line in there?
In some areas they can, in some areas they're just stuck with what they got.
Okay.
So that's the end of mine.
All right, thanks, Jeff. All right, at this time, I think we'll move on to item 17. I will turn this over to our vice chair at this point.
Okay, does anybody need any quick recess? Nobody? Okay, if not, we'll be going out of open session at 7:42.
You wanna read what the